Now let's talk about the most important part of any multimedia laptop. Hey guys, King Techk here again. Coming from the reel I posted about how to select through multiple laptops we have in the market today, especially if your intended use is for production processes. Well, that video seemed to get a lot of attention and more people want in-depth selection processes. This is gonna be that video. And before we go ahead, kindly hit the like button and subscribe. And you might also want to follow me on Instagram too, because I post there every day. Links in the description below. If you are new into the world of computers and laptops and all this type of stuff, and all those very many technical terms and specifications can be really confusing, especially if you do not have a lot of money to splurge on the latest and the newest devices, which isn't always necessary, because there are still some older models that can handle very much any task that you want it to handle. Do not always think about purchasing the newer stuff. So this is going to be the guide that you need to ensure you do not get a laptop that will give you problems. In this video, I will outline and break down everything you need to look out for in a laptop before purchasing one. And why should you listen to me on this subject? Well, I've been a creative and worked with computers for the past 13 years now, and I've had years and years and years of experience in this field. So I believe I know what I'm talking about when it comes to laptop. And lastly, this video would be tailored towards people who intend to get a laptop for production or creative purposes, say graphic design, web design, animations, 3D, video editing, you name it. This is the type of computer you would need. You should also have in mind that these types of laptops are more expensive than the regular business laptops. Now, this would be the base requirement for any production laptop. If you can get higher specs than this, that would be awesome. So first and foremost, the RAM. Given the software requirement for most softwares, especially from 2022 upward, it requires that you have at least 16 gigabytes of RAM to work smoothly. You might get away with using 8 gigs for not so intense tasks though, but 16 gigabytes is recommended. That is the base requirement. And you also want to make sure that the laptop does not have onboard RAM. You want it to have the removable type of RAM. You also want to stay away from laptop with very thin form factor. You want a laptop that is a bit bulky, not very heavy though. Moving on to storage. The base storage size you should be going for should be 500 gig, and this can be a hard disk. But if you have a little more money to spend, I'd advise you go for an SSD. Although SSD are more expensive than hard disk, but if you can afford it, it is advisable because SSD has no spinning parts, unlike hard disks, and it processes micro data a lot better than hard disk could ever. So it's always advisable to have your programs installed in an SSD while you pull files from the hard disk to work with. But if you do not have a lot of money, you can get started with a hard disk and of course upgrade over time. So let's talk about the processor. If you're going for a laptop and not a desktop, you might want to stay away from i9 models. i9 models only perform better in a desktop, but for laptops, you want to go for an i5 or an i7 computer. You would get the most performance from these processors when compared to i9s. i9 will always throttle in a laptop because of its slim form factor. And what throttling simply means is when the laptop is working at a very high speed, it will begin to heat up the longer it works, and when you try to hit that very high 5 gigahertz speed, it will get really hot, and if it should continue like that, it could fry itself and of course kill the motherboard. And in order to avoid that from happening, it will intentionally slow itself down so that it will cool down a little bit so it doesn't fry itself. You would experience those slowdowns in your editing software, hence you are not really getting the i9 experience. But i5 or i7 will most likely deliver a consistent speed over a long period of time with no issues. Next, let's talk about the screen. You want to get a laptop that has an IPS display. An IPS display has more vivid colors, hence if you are doing any creative work, you can be sure that the colors you are seeing is the color that everybody else will see on their devices, which is very essential when it comes to doing anything, let's say color grading or Photoshop design or whatnot. You really want to make sure that you are seeing actual colors, so you do not go get an LCD display that does not display colors accurately. You can't really get this information on the computer itself. You can only get this information on the manufacturer's website. So you want to browse up the model of the laptop and check for the type of display that is being used on it. And of course, you also want to do your physical color test and download the color spectrum and just try to judge if the colors are accurate across the board. You also want to get a laptop that has at least 90% sRGB. That would further ensure that you would be seeing accurate colors. Otherwise, you might have to connect your laptop to an external monitor that has accurate display. Now, let's talk about the most important part of any multimedia laptop. It's something called a dedicated video memory. Now, this video memory is how much memory your laptop has to handle graphic tasks. It can be 1 gigs, 2 gigs and higher. If it can even go as high as 16 gigs. But then those laptops are very expensive. But you want to have at least 2 gigabytes of dedicated video memory. This is how you can check. You want to right click on the desktop, For Windows 11, you want to click show more options and then NVIDIA control panel. If the drivers has been installed correctly, that option would appear there. After this pops open, you want to come to system information. Now when system information opens up, you want to scroll down to where it says dedicated video memory. Now I have 4 gigabytes in here in this computer. And the second way to check for this is you want to go to task manager and then you want to go to processes and come down to GPU, which is the very last one here. And right here you will see how many gigs you have installed. As you can see, it still indicates 4 gigabytes here. So that's how you can check the specification of your GPU. And I'm sure you would have noticed that I have an NVIDIA GPU installed on my computer. Well, there are 2 major companies that specializes in GPU production. It's NVIDIA and AMD. Although I've always been using NVIDIA chips, I've never really experienced AMD chips. So it's what I know that I'll talk about. So NVIDIA chip to a large extent is what I would recommend. And lastly, about the GPU, not a lot of people is aware that NVIDIA has discontinued a certain chip they produce up to a certain year. And I still see these laptops with old, outdated GPU still being sold in the market. So in order for you to not go buy such laptops, you want to make sure you're buying a laptop with an NVIDIA chip in it that can still support most of 2023 software updates. And how you can check for that, simply, you want to check for the model of the NVIDIA card in the laptop. First off, as you can see right here, I have a Quadro P2000. Let's go to Google and say NVIDIA P2000 production date or release date, however, whichever one you want to use. And here you can see this was produced in 2017. That's the most important thing you really want to be sure of. And for your information, NVIDIA has discontinued any chip older than 2016. So you want to always make sure you check for that. I think I still have an old laptop that has a Quadro. I think it's K11M, and that was produced in 2013. And when I used to edit on that laptop, my Premiere Pro keep crashing. In a day, it crashes like 5 times, especially during when you want to render a project after days or hours of editing. Hence, I'll have to get creative and start exporting it half and half with green screen and stuff. You do not want to go through that stress, trust me. So make sure your laptop has an up-to-date or a supported GPU before purchasing it. And pretty much this is everything you really want to check for. And to recap, you want to check for RAM size 16 gigs, storage 500 gig HDD or an SSD, screen an IPS display, processor an i5 or an i7, and most importantly, the GPU. I hope this video helps you in some way in making the best decision for laptops you're about to purchase today or whenever. Please do like this video, share with a friend or family, and hit the subscribe button so we can keep making these videos for you. Peace.